So we have the opportunity today to hear from 3 state leaders on their efforts to build a more inclusive, efficient, and responsive education and workforce ecosystem. Each of these gentlemen you are going to hear from work with NGA on a regular basis, and we have learned so much from them as they implement state visions to strengthen career pathways and to build economic mobility. The first of these speakers is Nick Moore, who leads the Alabama Credential Registry and the Alabama Committee on Credentialing and Career Pathways for Governor Ivey. Nick?
Well, thanks so much, Amanda. It's a pleasure to join you. I want to thank you and the team at NGA as well as WGU and my fellow panelists here who I've just learned a ton from over the years as we have worked in our regions, in our states. But truly, I think a lot of the things we're all working on are rising to the surface, and I hope that some of the good work that we're all doing collectively will end up in the reauthorization of WIOA and the Higher Education Act. So hopefully that's one of the big outcomes from this conference. And I know there's a lot of ink being spilled in that regard. And so I want to just share a few examples of what Governor Ivey has done working directly with business and industry and our stakeholders in Alabama to make a talent development system that's demand-based and that is working from a human-centered design. When Governor Ivey came into office of April 2017, the first thing that she recognized is that our labor force participation rate is quite anemic, and also our state's post-secondary attainment rate. So she decided to rally a whole of government approach and set up the Governor's Office of Education and Workforce Transformation to develop a process by which our human services, workforce, and education agencies were all working to make sure that we have a no wrong door approach to our public workforce system. Now, we've been talking about connecting education and the economy for many years, and that's very hard to do if you don't have an original position. So what we began to do is develop sector strategies, and we codified something called the Alabama Committee on Credentialing and Career Pathways that works on 3 primary missions every year. Number one, coming up with a list of in-demand jobs for the state. Every different group has a different list of in-demand jobs or using different data, then you really can't go very far. And then once you've identified what those jobs are, to understand what are the competencies and the credentials that compose the DNA of those in-demand jobs. And so once we figured out what is the recipe for our in-demand jobs, then we can return that back to education and training providers so that we're not using the let's build it and they will come or the train and pray model, which is so prevalent in a more analog industrial model of learning. So what this does is opens up the door for skills-based hiring and competency-based learning, which are 2 big outcomes that we're looking at from an equity perspective. And one reason is that the people need to own their learning in the same way that we own registering for a trip or getting an airline ticket. It's got to be very personalized and lifelong, and that's why I'm so happy to be part of this conference, because we're talking about making sure that we're equalizing career pathways using competency-based learning so that a young person can proceed through a career pathway, earn an associate degree, complete an in-school youth apprenticeship, get into the workforce in a compressed period of time. And then for older folks or for adult learners to be able to have multiple points of entry and exit so that we can unbundle degrees, use prior learning assessment, give people credit for their lived experiences, and so that we can make all learning count. And I know that's a big thing. It's a priority for WGU and why they're such a strong partner nationally. And so once we've developed a credential and competency currency, we're able to then unbundle and modularize traditional degrees. And this is not something that's mutually exclusive from traditional 2 and 4 year degrees. And that's a big thing that we want to make sure that we're level setting in Alabama with our 2 and 4 year university partners, is that this is a way to grow the pool of students who otherwise would not have had access to post-secondary learning. So just as we've democratized access to financial aid through the Higher Education Act, we have to democratize new forms of learning, taking advantage of technology. And just like credit and time has been a substitute or a fill-in for learning for over 100 years, the states and the institutions like WG and others in the country that are leading in this space, that are providing those new modes of learning, are going to thrive over the next decade. Those that do not are going to have some challenges, and we just have to be frank about that. And part of it is not talking about this, as I said, in a way that's mutually exclusive. There's a lot of people right now that argue against, for example, providing Pell for short term credentials because we're looking at this monolithically as though those cannot be stackable, or that we're not intentionally designing those to be stackable so that someone progresses from an entry level to a middle skill to a destination occupation. So I want to be very clear that that is what we are trying to do in Alabama, is provide somebody a clear interstate highway. If we want to talk about it from that analogy, our job is to keep the traffic clear, keep people moving. It's up to every individual to be able to decide what ramp they want to get off of, and to really declare what is the full potential for them so that they reach the basically whatever destination they want to get off of. If you go down I-65 in Alabama, and I know that runs through Indiana, so I'm sure PJ's been on there, you don't just run into the Gulf of Mexico, you get off on I-10. And so career pathways are not, uh, we can't think about it as just linear. We've got to think about these as lattices. And as we are defining career pathways, we've got to make sure that skills are transferable from one industry sector to the next. And also thinking about this from the first and last dollar elements. People do need assistance persisting in the workforce, and sometimes it's wraparound and supportive services. Childcare and transportation are big concerns in Alabama. And so what we're doing is coupling the wraparound human services, thinking about things like benefits cliffs so that people understand what does self-sufficiency look like. If we want to increase labor force participation, if we want to increase attainment, we've got to make sure that work is paying for all people. And so the governor has broken our attainment labor force goal down into 16 discrete special populations, and we're geofencing. And as we like to say, we've got an evangelical outreach approach, not in the religious sense, but in the sense of going out and finding people where they are. And we've taken our 2020 combined WIOA plan, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, and made that a vision statement rather than a compliance document for the public workforce system. And we admire a lot of the work, and in fact, model a lot of what we did after what PJ and his team have done, I think now over 2 governors and their governor's workforce cabinet, making sure that the public workforce system is being led by business and industry, and is also braiding and blending funds to support learners, to support job seekers, and not to support what's in the best interest of an agency. And so we've taken our WIOA performance indicators and have made the denominator how many people are in each of those 16 special populations, in the numerator, how many have we served well. And we've aligned. And I'm sorry about that. I should have said on the outset that our state's broadband expansion effort had not quite yet made it to the basement of the Capitol. So please forgive me for that pause there. But that's a good time for me to wrap up. And I'll just close by saying our demand based talent development system is going to go from what is right now an arithmetic rate of growth for attainment labor force participation using 3 technology solutions launching next year. We want to go to a geometric rate of growth for people re-entering the workforce and attaining a post-secondary credential. And that 3 legs of the triad is our credential registry, that working with Credential Engine, Illumina, several other partners, we are registering and making transparent the quality of every non-degree credential in the state, and then returning that data to those data to employers and job seekers so they can make skills-based job descriptions. And then the third leg, our learning and employment record. Many folks have worked with the U.S. Chamber Foundation, and I know WGU is working on an LER, so that we have essentially got the match.com for talent, so that employers are able to match talent with opportunity, and that we truly do have a purchase order system so that we make a job description. We can see exactly what is the match between a job seeker to that opportunity. And when we're talking about developing training programs, that we get education and training providers responding to that order rather than the other way around. So thanks again for allowing me to join you today. It's been a pleasure, and certainly do look forward to hearing what my counterparts in other states have to say, and I'll return it back to you, Amanda.
Great, Nick. Thank you so much. And we already have some questions coming in for you. So once we get to the Q&A, we'll circle back and hear a little bit more about the work in Alabama. And I will say from the NGA perspective, Nick is a powerhouse, and the state of Alabama is lucky to have his energy and his dedication. So excited to hear more when we get to the Q&A. So now we're going to transition over to a voice from Indiana. Hopefully on the first day, you noticed we had a little bit of an Indiana theme. We had opening remarks from Governor Holcomb. We were able to hear from Ivy Tech Community College System, and then we discussed the Indiana Achievement Wallet effort, which is the LER system that has a lot of collaborators and is doing some exciting things in the state of Indiana. So now we are going to hear from PJ McGrew, who enables statewide cross-sector infrastructure investment in Indiana through his role as chair of Governor Holcomb's Workforce Development Committee. PJ?
Thanks, Amanda. You'll hear a lot of similarities, I think, in what you heard from Nick and what we are doing here in Indiana. First, just want to really talk about the governor's workforce cabinet and the creation of that, and why Governor Holcomb felt it was important to bring together all of the state agencies, as well as having an employer-led cabinet really driving forth some of these initiatives. You know, when Governor Holcomb took over in 2017, I think he quickly realized that there was a lot of activity across all of the state agencies in this space, but it was not always coordinated as well as it should have been. Our former state workforce board sat underneath our Department of Workforce Development and was really seen as a DWD only initiative. So after about a year of examination, really looking at things, we worked with the General Assembly in 2018 to move that out from underneath the Department of Workforce Development and directly under the governor's office. Our workforce board had grown to 53 members. It wasn't near as nimble as what it should have been. And like I mentioned before, was really focused on DWD initiatives and not the talent development system as a whole. So we reorganized and knew that we really needed to have that led by somebody from the governor's office. And so we've been doing that over the last several years. I highlighted here on the slide that probably the most important piece of this, I think, in the first couple of years of establishing the cabinet was really just bringing together all of those agencies, one, to recognize and understand what they were working on, where there might have been duplicative activity, and to align those efforts. Next slide, please. So, you know, we sat down with all of our employers that were on the cabinet, all of the agency heads, and came up with a new mission and vision. We had, I think, similar to what Nick had mentioned, we're really focused on the demand aspect of the work that we were doing, but it was really focused on the short-term demand or the immediate demand for several years in Indiana. So we wanted to flip that script to really be focused on a talent-driven education and workforce system to make sure that we were enabling Hoosiers to be prepared for those jobs of the future. And that is just what we did with the creation of our Next Level Jobs program. So next slide, please. So the cabinet sits in a great space where we help coordinate activity across the various state agencies. And we created two primary state-funded workforce programs with our Workforce Ready Grant program, which is really targeted toward individual Hoosiers, and our Employer Training Grant program, which provides employers with an opportunity to upskill incumbent workers or to train new hires. We focused in on our key sectors of the state. You'll notice with the Workforce Ready Grant, we direct funds toward advanced manufacturing, building and construction, health and life science, IT and business services, and transportation and logistics. And with the Employer Training Grant, we added in agriculture as well. That's because on the Workforce Ready Grant side of things, there really was not a whole lot of short-term certifications that were available in the agricultural space. So you'll see that that's why we only have those 5 key sectors there. The Workforce Ready Grant is a short-term certificate, anything from 8 weeks all the way through a year-long program, really focused on those stackable credentials that Nick had mentioned, that they're working on as well to provide those on and off ramps for folks to be able to go directly into employment and then come back into the system to move up to that next level job opportunity. Next slide, please. So you'll see here, we have a $4 million annual investment in our Workforce Ready Grant program. Now that's just on the non-credit side of the house. On the credit bearing side of things, we leverage about a $7.5 million line item at our Commission for Higher Education, their adult student grant, as well as Pell. For us to do that, just last year alone, we leveraged about $16.5 million of Pell funding for the Workforce Ready Grant program and only $3.5 million in state funds at our Ivy Tech Community College alone. On the employer training grant side, we invest $20 million annually. We allow employers to draw down $50,000 there, and we're seeing great results in them providing matching funds for that. On the Workforce Ready Grant program, since we created that in 2017, we've seen over 51,500 Hoosiers enroll in the program, 27,600 completions now, and average wage gains or median wage gains, I should say, of $6,800 a year. On the employer training grant side, we've partnered with, almost 4,000 employers now. Trained almost 42,000, and we're seeing wage gains there of about $4,100. We're very excited about that. On the Workforce Ready Grant side, we're now starting to look at our job placement rates coming out of that program, not just the wage gains that we're seeing. We're at about a 75% job placement rate for our Workforce Ready Grant participants. And that does not include those individuals that go on to continue their education. So once we get that data set in from our university partners here in the coming months, we'll be able to see what that real placement rate is for those that also go on to post-secondary. Next slide, please. One other important aspect of the work that we do at the cabinet is we became the Perkins eligible entity for the state in 2019. This was because career and technical education was really split apart between our Department of Education on the secondary side and our Department of Workforce Development on the post-secondary side. And what we found through our initial analysis in the first year of establishing the cabinet was that there was no connectivity between what was happening in secondary CTE to those post-secondary courses and degree programs or employment opportunities. There was lack of broad employer support and awareness of the skills and competencies that our CTE programs were delivering on. And there was really a lack of student awareness on how they could connect to jobs after they finished high school. So it was really important for us. We began a 2-year redesign process of our entire secondary CTE system. Just last week, we announced the new courses that will be available for next year for the final 15 pathways that we have been redesigning over the last 2 years. So we've overhauled 70 of our career pathways now, really to create better alignment and seamless transitions from secondary to post-secondary to allow our secondary students that off-ramp right into employment after they graduate high school. So we just did a soft launch this year of those programs of study. We've seen about 130,000 students enroll in the new courses this year alone. And students will have the opportunity, if they fully participate in CTE for 2 years in high school, to earn 1 year's worth of post-secondary credit at Ivy Tech Community College or Vincennes University. And we have a number of programs that we've established where you could do a 1 year of high school to earn that, or 2 years of high school to earn that first year of college credit, 1 year at a community college, and then 2 years at our post-secondary, our 4-year institutions to earn that bachelor's degree. So we're really excited about that 1+1+2 model in a number of areas. You can go ahead and go on to the next slide. All of that led us to the creation of our WIOA state plan and really wanting to leverage that more of a strategy document, not a compliance document, similar to what Alabama had done, and really focused in on target populations and how all of the programs that we included in our combined plan could be utilized collectively and together to provide support to those target populations. So that was really important and led us into being able to put together our plan as we moved into our rapid recovery plan for dealing with COVID-19. So you can go ahead and advance to the next slide. Within that state plan, thinking about things a little bit differently and measuring progress in different ways, this was really important for the governor. that we were looking at the economic impact of our program. So how are we increasing median wages across the state? Looking at our employment metrics. So how are we dealing with labor force participation in job placement and not just looking at our unemployment rate? Really making sure that we were progressing towards the state's 60% goal, but having multiple opportunities to capture that 60% goal, and communicating to individuals that it does not have to mean go straight into a 4-year experience post high school, but what are those quality post secondary credentials that you could earn to then stair step throughout one's career for that lifelong learning. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. So that led us to our COVID response. The very next day after the Workforce Cabinet approved our WIOA plan, we began work dealing with COVID-19. We did not know the impact of COVID-19 back in March of 2020, but we knew that we were going to have to do something with that and respond in some way. So we had 3 primary goals, really growing those short-term education and training opportunities to quickly upskill and reskill those that were going to be impacted by the pandemic, get employers, money in the hands of employers to be able to train new workers and upskill their incumbent workers as technology was changing how they operated, and then also then be able to direct Hoosiers impacted by COVID-19 to all the opportunities that were available to them. Next slide, please. So we leveraged the success of our next level jobs programs. We utilized over $100 million of additional investment from the CARES Act to expand eligibility in our in the short term for our Workforce Ready Grant program to individuals that had a degree. Previously, if you had a degree, you weren't eligible to participate in the Workforce Ready Grant. We expanded the program to include some shorter term programs that might not always meet the wage requirements, such as the CNA that our Workforce Ready Grant typically pushes people toward, and then expanded that out to include CDL as well, knowing that logistics was severely impacted by the pandemic. We expanded the amount of money that was available to $10,000 from the $5,500, and then on the individual side of the Workforce Ready Grant side, and then $100,000 for our employers to participate in the employer training grant. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. So what we saw during our COVID response efforts, which we launched in June of 2020 through January 2021, was about 16,000 enrollments in our Workforce Ready Grant program, with about 8,000 folks completing that. Our job placement rate, was about 75%. We had 1,200 employers that participated in the employer training grant during that period. And we saw a 300% increase in minority, women-owned, and veteran-owned businesses, which was really important for us and a focus of the governor. We dedicated minimally $5 million of that $100 million for minority, women-owned, and veteran-owned businesses, and we thought that was really important. We ended up spending about $7.5 million on those businesses, so we were really excited about that. And we got 11,500 individuals trained through our employer training grant there. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. So right now, dealing with our unemployment insurance data project. So we're sorting our UI claimants by their educational attainment and then sending them directly to the education and training programs that are available for them. So if someone doesn't have a high school diploma, for instance, we're not sending them information about an associate degree program. We're sending them information about the adult ed site that is in their county, right down the road from them, so they can pick that up, and then we'll be sending them information about what is next for Workforce Ready Grant or post-secondary education training. We're revitalizing our occupational ranking methodology. I think, like Nick said, when they look at that demand on an annual basis, we think that's really important to us. We want to make sure we have the right metrics there as we're looking at demand and wages, short-term, mid-term, and long-term demand paired with that wage metric. And then one exciting thing I think that we're really working on is this additional short-term training opportunities via the Indiana Career Accelerator Fund. This past legislative session, our General Assembly dedicated $75 million to short-term training, 6 months or less,
Great, thank you, Nick. And we're excited to hear from the state of Indiana yet again about the exciting work that's going on. And I know we are going to circle back to you. I've already written a couple questions, and I know we'll have some that come in from attendees. So excited to dive in even a little bit deeper to the work that's happening in Indiana. Last but certainly not least, we will hear from Aaron Fichtner from the New Jersey Community College Council. Aaron?
Hi, Amanda. It's such an honor to be here with you, Amanda, and to be on a panel here with Nick and PJ and to learn about the great work that's going on in South Carolina, in Alabama and Indiana, sorry. So I'm Aaron Fichtner. I'm president of the New Jersey Council of County Colleges. Prior to joining the community colleges 3 years ago, I worked for the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development for 7.5 years and worked very closely with NGA and have stayed very in touch with your amazing work. So thank you, NGA, for pulling this together and giving us an opportunity to have this really important discussion. So my council brings together our 18 community colleges in a strong network. We do not have a state system of community colleges. We have a network working under our quasi-governmental nonprofit. And so I'm happy very much today to share the work that we are leading with our business community in New Jersey and other partners to respond to this really unique moment. So we really understand in the community college sector that we have a real important responsibility as leaders in workforce development to make sure that we are meeting our state's goal of 65 by 25, 65% post-secondary degree and credential attainment by 2025. New Jersey, we are on average a fairly well-educated state, so 52% of our adult population has a post-secondary credential, but we've got a long way to go to get to 65 by 25. And we have incredibly significant gaps in post-secondary attainment by race and ethnicity and by geography that we need to address if we're going to make sure that we have a healthy economy in New Jersey. New Jersey's economy has long been driven by not only our location in the Northeast Corridor, but also our skilled workforce, and that is our main competitive advantage. So here we are trying in this very unique moment of incredible change in the economy to make sure that we have a system of education and workforce that is driven by the needs of employers, that recognizes that we have a need to create a strong ecosystem, that no single institutions can work solely by themselves to address the challenges that we face, that we're building stronger pathways with on-ramps and off-ramps for all New Jerseyans, no matter where they are in their careers or the careers that they've pursued or their age, and that we are addressing the significant issues of equity in our state, making sure that all New Jerseyans have access to the post-secondary pathways to get a family supporting wage. So the challenges that we face are great. I think in this moment, New Jersey has a higher than average unemployment rate. We've had slow economic growth out of this pandemic. And we are working with a significant investment of $8.5 million in state funding to launch our Pathways to Career Opportunities initiative. It is a partnership between our 18 community colleges and our New Jersey Business and Industry Association, which is our largest industry group in New Jersey, but also bringing in all of the other key partners in workforce and education, from our four-year colleges and universities to our vocational technical high schools, our workforce development boards, our community-based organizations, and certainly our partners across state government. And so with this investment in the state budget, we are launching a broader initiative building on some work that began last year to do two things. One is to establish collaboratives in 4 key industries, creating that ecosystem based on high quality labor market information and input from employers. And we're establishing centers of excellence at our colleges with other education partners in 10 subsectors of the economy to build the pathways that we think will make sure that we're opening up opportunity and building that skilled workforce. Next slide, please. We are, I think, like our colleagues in Alabama and Indiana, are very much adopting a pathway framework to the work that we do, understanding again that we need to build strong linkages between different levels of education and workforce development, that we need to build on-ramps and on-ramps, that we need to build much more thoughtful, stackable credential pathways that allow people to continue to earn, to move up the career ladder by accumulating credits and credentials with a focus on making sure that there's no dead ends in our educational system. And so this pathway framework very much underscores and is the foundation for all the work that we're doing in this initiative. Next slide, please. So this initiative has a couple of key components. One is the collaboratives, which are focused on 4 different key industries, and those industries are health services, innovation technology, energy and infrastructure, and manufacturing and logistics transportation. And what we're doing with the collaboratives is we are establishing industry leadership teams consisting of employer leaders in each of those sectors that will be guiding our work. And we are creating an ecosystem of partners from a whole set of different institutions, from our community colleges, our 4-year college partners, workforce boards, community-based organizations, and others that will commit to working together to share information, to find areas of organic partnership and collaboration. The collaboratives will be in partnership with our Department of Labor and Workforce Development, doing some really intensive and rigorous analysis of labor market data. We'll be guided by our industry leadership team to develop strategy plans for each of these industries to make sure that we understand and all of our partners understand the changing needs of these industries, and that we're taking the steps that we need to build a skilled workforce for our key industries in New Jersey. We'll be identifying industry valued credentials in each of these industries, and we'll be mapping the most common and likely and needed career pathways, stackable credential pathways around that work. So the collaboratives are a statewide initiative to build an ecosystem and to be employer driven through much more high quality and targeted information on the changing needs of the labor market. Next slide, please. The second half of this initiative are centers of excellence, and we're establishing 10 centers of excellence, which are within those 4 industries that I mentioned, and they range from patient care in health services to data analytics and innovation technology to renewable energy in our energy infrastructure sector and logistics and transportation in manufacturing and supply chain management. So we are, each of the centers of excellence is a partnership of 3 of our community colleges working closely with a 4-year college partner, a vocational technical school partner, and other partners in this ecosystem to work with employers to identify needs, identify areas where we need to build new curriculum, to build that curriculum that then is shared widely across the state with all of our partners, to build model agreements to make sure that we are expanding radically the number of dual enrollment agreements between high schools and colleges, the number of transfer agreements between our colleges, our community colleges, and our 4-year college partners. And we're building a much more rigorous system of prior learning assessments to make sure that adult learners who come to community college and to 4-year colleges with some experience can get credit to accelerate their path to a credential or a degree. Next slide, please. So again, these are the industries of focus along the top. It's the 4 large industries that we're focusing on, and in the blue boxes, it's the 10 centers of excellence. I mentioned a couple of those, but happy to talk about others in the questions. We use labor market data and interviews and input from employers to identify the focus areas of this initiative. Next slide, please. So this is some of the data, probably too small to see, but all of the 10 areas that are the focus of our centers of excellence are expected to grow at a rate faster than the economy as a whole. All 4 are sub-industries that are really foundational to our state's economic health. All 10 offer opportunities for stackable credential pathways. And so we're excited to be working within those 10 subsectors in those larger 4 industries. Next slide, please. So we have an aggressive timeline. A lot of this work builds on our efforts to establish collaboratives last year. So we have a strong section of partnerships to build on. We are establishing and announcing our centers of excellence leads next month. We'll have a statewide convening in December to launch this effort with substantial work coming out in 2022. With new curriculum, new partnerships, the industry reports that I mentioned. But we really believe at this unique moment coming out of this pandemic that the trends, the acceleration of changes in the economy really mean that we've got to do things very, very differently. And for us in New Jersey, that means really redoubling our efforts to build stronger connections to employers, to understand labor market information and trends with a real emphasis on high quality labor market information and intelligence, to build that ecosystem that allows us all to collaborate and not to compete, but to work together, and to really redouble our efforts to build pathways that can open up opportunities to more New Jerseyans. And so happy to be here with all of you to share our Pathways to Career Opportunities initiative, and excited to be part of this dialogue on how we all work together to make sure that we're opening up doors of opportunity to more people across the country, and making sure we do it in a way that's really driven by the needs of our changing economy. So thank you all. Look forward to questions and discussion.
Great, thank you, Aaron. And now, before we jump into some of the Q&A, which I know the chat is popping, so we're gonna get over to that in just a few minutes. But first, I'd like to take my facilitator prerogative to ask a few questions of the panelists myself that I've jotted down during your discussions. We'll start with those, and then we'll transition over to the chat. So if you haven't dropped your pressing questions in there, please do so, and in just a few minutes, we'll get over to those. So I'll jump all the way back to Alabama and Nick. And something I've actually wondered and was just cemented with your presentation today is, how do you keep all of these initiatives connected and strategically coordinated? Specifically, how does Governor Ivey's strategic vision that you talked about drive this work, and how is it reinforced as you work across agencies?
That's a great question, and I think it's definitely a good question to ask in the perspective of NGA, because the leadership of the governor is the most decisive element in this. You're simply not going to be able to coordinate at the state level education, workforce, human services, economic development without the governor setting those expectations and priorities. And then secondly, having the legislature and the business community providing the support for the governor to expect big things from agencies. The natural status quo in government is to not do not do a whole lot of new things. And that's nothing against any particular person or agency. It's just that disruptive innovation is not something that is the MO of state government. So it takes the governor setting the vision and then creating a strategic plan that gets people excited, that shows everybody this is your lane, and this is how, if you succeed and hit your targets, how you'll be rewarded for that. And this is how your agency, this is how your group will be relevant in this plan. And that also helps to mitigate some of the latent just competition or scrum between agencies for scarce resources if you don't have the governor leading the charge, and that's just sort of state of nature where everybody's trying to get funding from the legislature. So, but just to reiterate, the governor has got to be leading.
That's great, Nick, thank you. And of course, that's always what we love to hear at NGA, that the visions of the governors are really driving some of this exciting change. So building on that, sort of the innovation element and the challenge that comes with state government and moving in new directions, I'd love to jump over to PJ and talk a little bit about the work in Indiana. What benefits are you seeing through the new implementation of the cabinet collaborative model, benefits around strategy connection, around data sharing? What are some of your key takeaways about how this structure for governance has accelerated the work?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I mean, I think similar to some of what Nick discussed, I mean, really this being led by the governor has kind of forced our agencies to rethink how they work together. Let's not set up programs in silos. Both DWD and our Commission for Higher Education had kind of similar analogous programs that were running alongside of each other. Previously, we were able to condense those down and collaborate around our Workforce Ready grant to really provide more Hoosiers with real opportunities for some upward mobility rather than what we were seeing and how some of those programs were developed prior to. It also allows us to analyze where programs are housed and if the agency that's running a program is really the right agency to house that program. I think, for instance, the first year of the cabinet when we were reviewing all of our workforce initiatives and programs, looking at something like our Hoosier Initiative for Reentry, which was really a employability skills program that our Department of Workforce Development was running for folks that were recently released from our prison system. And we were reflecting on that, and with all of the great technical skills training that was happening within our prisons, thought, why not move that into the prison system as well? And so we did that, and what we're seeing now is lower recidivism rates. We're seeing higher job placement rates right post release, as well as folks getting hired at higher wages right after release than what they were before. And so and this model has really allowed us to examine the system in a comprehensive way and really start to identify who should be doing what, and where we need to come together for collaboration.
Great, thank you so much, PJ. And Aaron, no big surprise, I'm going to jump over to you for this next question. You talked about a lot of partnerships within your presentation. I'd really be interested in hearing a little bit more about how you work with Governor Murphy's administration. He's the current vice chair of the National Governors Association, and we know that he is dedicated to workforce and education access, especially for underserved communities. So in thinking about your collaboration with partners, including state partners, but also CBOs, and thinking about the centering of those underserved communities and issues of racial equity within your career pathways work, I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on sort of where you sit and how those partnerships are moving your work forward.
Yeah, great question, Amanda. And obviously, since I'm not in state government, we have an interesting perspective on this. I would say that Governor Murphy has, as you mentioned, has set a very strong vision in New Jersey for expanding access to economic opportunity. We have a very ambitious tuition-free community college program. Governor's placed a huge emphasis on expanding apprenticeship, on building pathways around adult literacy, increasing pathways for people with intellectual developmental disabilities. There's a whole set of agenda items that have been important to Governor Murphy and his administration. And I think we realized in the community college sector that if we were going to be big partners in that vision, that we needed to step up and provide some leadership and to bring all the partners together to work in new ways. And so the vision for our collaboratives, I think, is really to create that space for all those partners to come together on an industry-specific basis, to share information and to, in a broad and inclusive way, to make sure that we've got a forum for community colleges to come together with community-based organizations that serve underserved communities, with proprietary schools that do an important role of providing entry-level training to a whole set of our population, to the four-year colleges and universities, to the high schools that do all of this work. And so the collaboratives model is really to create that space for those partnerships and that work. The work of our centers of excellence are really to build those pathways that will be inclusive and expansive. And so while this work is being led by community colleges, the work that we do to build pathways and align curriculum with high schools, with an emphasis on underserved and under-resourced communities in our state, with community faith-based organizations that are providing training to make sure that their curriculum is aligned with our curriculum for advancement opportunities for students. So this is, really much rooted in Governor Murphy's broader vision, but a recognition that the other partners in education and workforce really needed to provide some leadership to be part of that effort. And so we are really proud to be working very closely with our Office of Secretary of Higher Education, our Department of Labor and Workforce Development, our Economic Development Authority, our Department of Health. We've got some interesting partnerships with them around expanding pathways for community health employment. So this has really been very much rooted in the governor's vision, but a recognition that we in the education sector needed to do more than our fair share of responding to this moment and creating that real new approach to bringing in a whole set of partners that might not have been at the table traditionally.
Great, Aaron. I think that ties back directly to some things we heard on the first day of our event, which is about a lot of this work being a team sport. Not one entity can handle all of the work themselves, and there's really critical roles for some of the partners to play. So I'm going to jump around a little bit, and I'm going to hop back over to PJ for my next question, but this is a question I'm going to pose for all of the panelists. It's really about how you engage and hear back from employers about the skills that they need as a part of your career pathway efforts. So the feedback mechanisms that you have, the opportunities to engage employers. I know, PJ, you mentioned the employer-focused grant that's focused around upskilling employees. I'd really love to hear the Indiana perspective on the engagement of employers before we jump over to the other states.
Yeah, so this has been something that we've tried to overcome for the last several years here, is getting broader buy-in and support from our employer community. It really started with working hand in hand with our state chamber of commerce as they work to really develop some partner tools for us to better understand all the resources that are available for employers across the state, whether that's federal programs, state programs, or even local programs. And I sit on the governing board for the Institute for Workforce Excellence, which is housed underneath our state chamber of commerce, and then leveraging their relationship with other employers to bring very sector specific initiatives together to look at the education and skills that we are delivering primarily through our CTE programs, which are directly aligned to those programs that are part of the Workforce Ready Grant. We've started in advanced manufacturing and IT to better understand those skills and get employer buy-in to help us develop a process then by which we go out and look at some of that other sector work. We're really excited about where we are with that. The feedback that we've gotten thus far is that we really have the right skills, at least in those two areas right now, and so we're hoping that we find out in the other sectors, as we've redesigned our entire tech CTE system, that we've included what employers are looking for across the board. But I think it also looking at the demand and using our demand metrics to identify where we're directing funding also helps a lot with that.
Great. I also know that Alabama is focused directly on engagement of employers and that workforce connection. So Nick, if you wouldn't mind calling out some of the mechanisms that you use to keep employers engaged and to get that feedback around the skills needed for all the career pathway work that you are engaged in.
I think it's important to level set with employers and to listen, but make things about what's the outcome. So we want to save employers time and money. What skills-based hiring can do is cause someone not to have to go through a stack of 1,000 resumes and not to have to verify references, not to do a lot of the legwork that is required in the current HR and hiring process. And employers want the education and training community also to understand that they're their number one customer. I mean, the students are, of course, and families, but we have to think about the employer being the number one customer for our talent system. And once we have gotten the kind of buy-in to where they see we are flipping the script, and it is not the train and pray model, but they are truly a partner in developing education and training programs, they're very interested, and in fact we're scaling out and building employer-based training programs. A lot of the short-term training programs that are a focus of our workforce stabilization program, and we were happy to get a $17.8 million grant through the CARES Act, one of the US DOE competitive grants, the Reimagine Workforce Prep grant, and we've used that to establish a program somewhat similar to what PJ described, where we're focused in manufacturing, healthcare, IT, transportation, to build out short-term programs that articulate to 2- and 4-year degrees. And so I think as the states that get employers to understand that they are an equal partner in the development of training programs, that they will stay engaged and want to invest direct funding and also in-kind contributions and actually be at the table. And so many times when you hear from workforce agencies or different groups that say that they're having a hard time getting employers to show up, when you go and think about why, what are we doing for employers to get them to want to spend time away from their business to come and sit and listen to a bunch of people talk about things? Are we actually delivering results? I think if you make things results based and you're showing how you're saving them time and and money, and how that creates a more nimble and robust talent pipeline. They're going to be all in every day.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Understanding that ROI for the employers and going in with that messaging certainly is something that we've seen from states as a recommendation. And Aaron, let's go over to you. I know that community colleges have a very organic and strong relationship with regional employers. I wonder, as a part of the map of work that you're doing and the map of partnerships and initiatives, how do you engage employers across some of those conversations? So you're engaging them, but it's informing a lot of your work. Where does the employer voice sit within your efforts?
Yeah, this is a really important priority of this entire initiative. So this career opportunities initiative, Pathways Career Opportunities Initiative, is very much rooted in a partnership between our community colleges and New Jersey's Business and Industry Association. That is our largest statewide association of employers. And they have been very important leaders in New Jersey on a lot of these issues. And this is a real opportunity for them and for us to work together to get the right employers to the table. The work will start in our industry leadership groups for each of those 4 industries, and we're in the process of recruiting employers to serve on those groups that will meet on a quarterly basis to guide our entire effort. And each of our 10 centers of excellence will have industry leadership teams guiding their work. The Business and Industry Association is actively working to help us spread the word to the employer community, because I think they understand, and New Jersey's employers understand, that we have to really continue to transform and enhance our educational system, our workforce system, to create the kinds of programs that will respond to industry need to adopt this pathway framework. And so, the industry leadership groups and teams are going to be critical to that effort. And you're right, Amanda, our colleges have a lot of organic relationships with employers, and we're going to be building on those and bringing those employers to the table. But we have found that in all of our conversations with employers, industry groups, that they really understand the moment that we are in, that the economy is changing rapidly, and that they are seeing a real commitment on our side in community colleges to really transform the way we prepare people for work and careers and further education. And so we've had tremendous success in bringing people to the table. Clearly, working with our largest industry association as an anchor partner in this whole effort is incredibly helpful from a credibility standpoint. But we're very excited about the opportunity to work with employers in new ways to really transform our education system.
Great. Yeah, across all of those answers was certainly hearing the theme of partnership and collaboration, which is resonating throughout the rest of the sessions in this event. So I want to move to one more question from me, and then we will jump into some questions from attendees of the event. So again, as an attendee, if you have not put your question in the chat, please feel free to drop it in now, and we'll get to those in just a moment. So I would just love to hear from each state sort of some of the work that you're doing around supportive services for folks who need to access these workforce and education pathways. Some of you have mentioned some collaborations with other state agencies. I wonder what that's looking like in practice. How are those wraparound services, the childcare supports, the transportation supports, the sort of last mile funds for accessing workforce and education opportunities and skill building opportunities? I wonder how that's playing out in your state. So I'll change it up a little bit, and I'm going to jump right back to Aaron to talk about the way that the New Jersey Community College systems are thinking about those supportive services for students, and maybe some of your key takeaways over the last year and a half or so about the ways in which that process can be innovated and improved and is improving over the work you're doing.
So great question. And I think you're right. This pandemic has really underscored the need for us to understand that while we're opening up access to education and training programs, that if we neglect the need to help students get the supports, whether it's childcare or food assistance or transportation, housing, healthcare, that we're really going to leave too many people behind. And so we've really redoubled our effort to create a broad coalition of a whole set of organizations in New Jersey that are working on social service supports, So we're working with our community food banks, we're working with our Department of Human Services, we're working with Department of Health in new ways to try to bring the partners to the table. We've really redoubled our effort to strengthen the relationship between our community colleges and their boards of social services. Even though they both are county-based entities, they have not had the kind of collaborations that are needed to make sure that community college students in the credit and non-credit programs have easy access to all the supports, Amanda, that you talked about. So we are committed to doing more in this area. We're beginning to build the strong partnerships with state government and community-based organizations such as our food pantries, such as our food action networks, and our community-based organizations. And clearly there is continued to be more work to be done to make sure that social service supports and needs are not holding back our students or our individuals who are seeking better careers.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. I think you brought up some really great points there. First of all, the state and the local approach to this type of work. So not only is state agency connection needed, but a lot of this work and a lot of the support for students happens on the ground. It happens in local areas, it happens in towns and in county administered programs. So I think that state and local connection is key when thinking about some of these basic needs supports. So to change it up again, I am going to jump over to Alabama. And Nick, thinking about the way that basic needs supports or wraparound services is folded into these state level efforts and how you're envisioning that as a part of your overall strategy.
If you're in intergenerational poverty in Alabama or anywhere and something costs $100 and you've got 99, you're not going to get it. A lot of times this work begins by changing hearts and minds from the legislature to anecdotally across the state that people that are not participating in the labor force are doing that for a reason, because work is not paying for them. And we've got to make sure that we're creating the bridge programs to hold people harmless into the transition into paid employment. And so that's what our focus on supportive service is all about. A couple of particular examples, we've done something called the Human Capital Development Fund that extends the individual training accounts for people that are participating in our workforce stabilization program. It is essentially what a lot of people at the American Enterprise Institute and others have come up with as an alternative to just the way that we do ITAs. It would allow for human services and training services at one time out of one pot of funding. So hopefully we'll produce some data that may get ETA to want to push for that, and we owe a reauthorization. We also have a focus on intensive career services, knowing that we don't need to inadvertently track low income people and people of color into low wage jobs because we're not providing the right kind of career counseling in our one-stop centers. And connected to that, we've developed with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta a tool called DAVID, or the Dashboards for Alabamians to Visualize Income Determinations, that allows people and caseworkers to work together based on geography, family dynamics, and career to figure out when will someone reach self-sufficiency. And we hope to make sure that everyone in our public workforce system is using the common intake and needs assessment so that every Alabamian gets their Goldilocks, Willy Wonka golden ticket to the public workforce system, and it's about their needs and not, again, the needs of whatever door they happen to walk into. And a lot of this is being done through the talent development capstone course. So that is something that we've launched over the past year, to where every single member of our public workforce system and education system, community college, one-stop partners, are all being cross-trained on each other's programs, so that to the greatest extent possible under law, we can have people enrolling and co-enrolling in multiple programs without having to physically visit multiple state agencies.
Yeah, that's great. I think the power of that role of these connected strategic initiatives. So want to bring it to PJ for this question. We've heard a lot about Indiana work yesterday and hearing from you today. You all have a lot of efforts going on that are cross agency. So I wonder, in your conversations, the Workforce Cabinet, where does basic needs fit in the overall strategy? And what is the approach of your office and your initiatives to keeping those workforce and basic needs supports connected?
Certainly put a focus on, Amanda, and was highlighted extensively throughout our state strategic plan. I think one of the things that we really saw during the pandemic was a real need for us all to come together in even more comprehensive ways, and I think partnerships with folks at the local level. So really going into our local communities and having a team, a cross-agency team that was partnering with our faith-based organizations and community-based organizations, especially during the pandemic, to help on some of those efforts. Nick mentioned cross-training. That is one thing that we are really trying to lead on here in Indiana, is making sure that folks across our agencies know what services are available, who to connect people to when they come in, and then trying to have more co-location of services as well. And I think that's, we're starting to see really high impacts in our areas where we are combining our social services and our workforce services under one roof at the local level. So those are things that we're really trying to push on. We also, as part of the governor's efforts around equity and inclusion, we've deployed a team of folks out to the local level to really begin to identify what some of those additional barriers are preventing people from accessing some of these programs. We're supposed to have a report from that team here near the end of the year, so that going into this upcoming legislation, we can really identify if we need to make some improvements, enhancements to our programs to really help folks knock down those barriers even more.
Great. And I really think that sort of state level coordination and the coordination across initiatives certainly shows the power in the office that Governor Holcomb has set up that you're working in, PJ, that I think other states are going to look to as a possible example of ways to keep these really complex issues connected to a single vision. So while I have you, PJ, we're going to go ahead and jump over to a question from the chat. I know your audio cut out for just a minute right at the end of your presentation, and there was some interest in diving back in and hearing a little bit from you about what's next for the Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship in Indiana and the transitions that might be there, and how does that work-based learning and apprenticeship itself and the role of that office and its changing role, how does that fit into your broader efforts?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda, for that, and the audience for that question. Work-based learning is definitely a priority for us here in Indiana. The governor actually created the executive order a state office of work-based learning and apprenticeship. We are an OA or an SA state or an OA state right now, considering whether or not we need to transition to an SA state. But I think that the creation of that office happened before we established the governor's workforce cabinet. It was housed just because of the way that the state was structured at the time. We had a separately elected official that was running our Department of Education, so we housed that office at the Department of Workforce Development. And again, I think similar to the state workforce board, that was really seen primarily from outside folks as a DWD led initiative and not a cross-agency initiative. So earlier this year, we began that transition of the Office of Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship underneath the governor's workforce cabinet to really start to show that sense of collaboration, really stemming from middle school exploration activities through our secondary CTE programs that really have a focus of embedding high quality work-based learning in the newly redesigned model. And then our Commission for Higher Education set a goal that we included in our state workforce plan for all of our post-secondary education institutions to have 100% of their programs provide a career relevant activity for our college students before they graduated high school as well. So I think with the transition to graduation pathways, which is our new high school graduation model, we're looking at all of the diploma requirements that we have paired with employability skills, which could be done one of three ways: service-based learning, project-based learning, or work-based learning. And then the third component of our new graduation model is post-secondary ready competency demonstration, doing one of 9 different activities stemming from being a CTE concentrator to earning an industry recognized certification that's been validated by employers, are all leading us to trying to combine our efforts to push higher quality work-based learning in the state. Um, and then working with our outside partners, we have several intermediaries around the state that have received grants from various national partners and local partners to try to push forth on this effort to expand our secondary work-based learning opportunities, but an expansion of our Earn Indiana program. So this program was established, I believe, in 2010 to provide our low-income college students a way to access and gain some of that social capital they might not otherwise have by providing 50% of the wages that an employer would pay that individual for an internship that they would have. We've expanded that into the high school space now with the launch of graduation pathways. And so we're very excited about that and hope that more and more employers really look to work-based learning, not only for that talent attraction component, but also as a talent retention strategy as well.
Yeah, that's great, PJ. I mean, I think that is a good note for folks who are attending this event, that when we're talking about skills and lifelong learning systems, we often focus on sort of the workforce development piece, that piece that comes after high school. But certainly Indiana and other states have woven the conversation around skills and competencies and workforce readiness deeply into their K-12 systems and even into their deeply into their middle school and high school pathways. So that's a great note for us to keep in mind, that this really is lifelong learning systems that starts in that K-12 setting. So I had another question from the chat that I wanted to throw over to Aaron, and it's really talking about the Centers of Excellence structure. How are you developing sort of the partnerships that come to that? How are you welcoming folks to the table to be a part of that effort? What is that? Where are you in that process? And when do you anticipate you'll sort of be have everything solidified for that project?
So good question. So we are in the process of identifying final decisions on which of our 18 colleges is working in which of the centers of excellence. And I mentioned before that each center will have 3 community college partners. So we expect to be able to make a public announcement of those teams in each center by the end of November. And we're working with our sister council of the vocational technical schools, high schools, to identify how to layer in the vocational technical schools into the partnerships. We are also then reaching out and have been reaching out to four-year colleges and universities. We expect that each center will have 1 or 2 four-year college and university partners, and we've got some early conversations underway to build on partnerships that exist and kind of logical relationships. So we expect that by December that we should have our centers of excellence fully identified and publicly announced. But this is this has been a process to make sure that we understood which of our colleges had the interest, the capacity, the connections, the resources to be able to take this on with other partners. And so the collaboratives are really our much more inclusive effort. And so we are welcoming anybody and everyone into our collaboratives effort. The centers of excellence, I guess, for want of a better word, are more exclusive because that's going to be a lot of roll up your sleeves and do a lot of program and curriculum and partnership development work. Collaboratives are our opportunity to bring everybody to the table. And so we're expecting that a significant number of our four-year college partners, community-based organizations. I should also say that we are finalizing a memorandum of understanding between our community colleges and our local workforce development boards to bring them into this initiative and to work more closely between workforce and community colleges. So again, expect to have some announcements in December on our centers of excellence, with work really getting underway in January.
Well, Aaron, I wouldn't be surprised if you get some outreach about those collaboratives and folks who'd love to be engaged, because it does sound like an exciting effort. We look forward to seeing the announcements coming out of New Jersey about the work of the Centers of Excellence. So we only have a few minutes left. There was a bunch of discussion in the chat around the issue of prior learning assessment. And as we're thinking about skills and how they translate into career pathways and learning that's gained in lots of places outside a traditional classroom, I know you all bring different perspectives to this work, so I'd really love to hear about how your state is working to translate learning that happens anywhere into opportunities for advancement along a career pathway and along a credential pathway. So I'd love to throw it over to you, Nick, to talk about how prior learning assessment is figuring in to the conversation around skill development.
I love that question. One of the great byproducts of the work we've done with our occupational ontology, which is coming up with a alphanumeric number to classify every competency, knowledge, skill, or ability, and credential, is that then gives us a way to scale and systematize prior learning assessment and all types of credit for prior learning. The problem with credit for prior learning right now is that it is so bespoke and at the institutional level that it's kind of like the banking system in 1790, to where the value of the credit only goes about as far as you can throw it. And so we need this to be scaled at the state level. And so now that we have built out our occupational ontology that puts together the skill shape or the DNA for each job, we can then take the credit and time-based measures of learning and then just translate those down to the competencies that denote mastery of that learning experience. And then working through a committee that will be established early next year, our statewide non-degree credit articulation committee will be working with institutional representatives, workforce members, business and industry to then come up with a credit value for each learning experience, and then working with a regional accreditor and SAC COC to come up with a statewide non-degree credit articulation index and crosswalk. So that's the work that we plan on focusing on very heavily next year. And I think that is going to be something that is really necessary to make stackable pathways work at scale.
That's great, Nick. And you said all of that like it was easy. And you make this work sound so easy, and yet everything you said was super complicated and interconnected and really impressive cross-sector work. So no pressure to the other two panelists, but if you don't sprinkle the word bespoke and ontology into your remarks, I'm not sure what we'll do. So let's go ahead and throw this over to PJ next, and then we'll end with Aaron from the institutional perspective. But PJ, as you all are thinking across, especially next level jobs and some of Governor Holcomb's initiatives around career pathways, how is sort of capturing this learning that exists outside of a traditional classroom a part of that overall conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. This is extremely important to us. We I think realized rather quickly here at the onset of the pandemic, a year and a half ago or so now, that we needed to find a way to be able to award credit for skills, especially for those that were impacted by COVID-19. So we rather quickly worked with Ivy Tech Community College to look at how we could easily transition some of those folks in the food service industry to some of their business pathways, utilizing some of those CARES dollars that we received from our economic development team that were determining how CARES distribution was going to go. We're leveraging some philanthropic funding as well, and we've set up a PLA task force that is meeting regularly now as a result of that work that we did about a year ago to help those food service workers. Also, with the whole CTE redesign that we've done, working with Ivy Tech Community College, they already had in place about 30 pages worth of an Excel spreadsheet document, industry recognized certifications that they would award credit for. So where we don't have dual credit licensed teachers now, we are embedding those certifications into our high school courses, so students would be able to receive that post-secondary course credit by going through our CTE programs. And then similarly, when we look at our Workforce Ready Grant program, our non-credit bearing programs to our credit bearing programs, doing the same thing there. So we're making sure that if someone doesn't want to participate in a credit bearing opportunity, getting that industry recognized certificate so that they could stack that into a degree program when they're ready to come back in after that initial job for the next job.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, knowing that states are approaching this conversation, thinking about the learning that comes from all these different spaces and that it's sort of foundational to all your initiatives certainly is great and provides a great model for other states who are thinking about capturing that learning within their initiatives. Aaron, I know that community colleges have been thinking about prior learning assessment for many years, but as you're starting some of these collaborative conversations, where does PLA fit in the current work in New Jersey?
Yeah, so PLA is critically important to our work. If we're really going to open up those doors of opportunity and for in our sake, make sure that there is a much stronger connection between our non-credit and our credit offerings and that people are getting ability to accelerate to an associate's degree if they get a credential from somewhere else. So we are 100% committed. But as Nick said, this is usually a very institutional driven decision. And so we've been working this year with funding from the JP Morgan Chase Foundation to bring together our college leaders in a PLA task force to create a framework for agreement among our 18 colleges. And PJ, we've been inspired by the work of Ivy Tech and the directory that you talked about earlier to find the right way to create that for New Jersey, to get a commitment of our 18 colleges to agree to offer credit for a listing of industry valued credentials. So that if you showed up at any of our community colleges, and this is our dream, and you have a NIM certificate in metalworking, that you're going to get 6 credits towards an associate's degree in manufacturing technology or whatever it is. So we are very committed. We are very much down the road at getting agreement of our colleges to take a very new approach. And our work is very much built around, at this stage, industry valued credentials. That if someone earns an industry valued credential from our colleges on the non-credit side or earns it in another venue, that it would be honored when they showed up at a community college and want to enroll on the credit side. And so this is incredibly hard work. But if our pathways framework is really going to work in New Jersey, we've got to really figure out PLA and make sure that we've got a real commitment to opening up those doors of opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much, Aaron. I know it is complex work. I can see the dedication across all the states represented here to really make this happen and to make this work go forward. We're excited to be able to support and to be able to learn from all of you. So I want to take a moment to thank Aaron and PJ and Nick for joining us today. Your insights are invaluable, and I'm sure attendees were inspired by the complex, collaborative work that you all are undertaking, and we'll definitely be keeping our eye on you over the next year and checking back in on all the progress of these exciting initiatives.